How's it going, everybody? It's Lieutenant Atterbury back at it with the Lobo Pack podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Dean Weiss from the University College. Sir, it's awesome to have you on the podcast. The special thing about Dean Weiss is he has just come back from Fort Knox, where he got a very special opportunity to jump out of some planes with Golden Knights. But other than that, thank you again for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah. So we always ask our guests when they come on, were you originally from UNM? What's your origin story? How'd you get to come out here?
Okay, kind of a long and kind of an unusual story. So I'm originally from Connecticut. I went to college at Cornell University in upstate New York, and then I was in the advertising industry. When I graduated from college, I lived in New York and worked in a bunch of ad agencies and did that for 17 years until I got sick of advertising and sick of New York. And I had been doing a lot in the last 10 years, I would say I was there. Learned to ski, actually on a work trip in Vancouver. Cool. And started doing ski trips out west and fell in love with the West and was getting disenchanted with New York. So I left in 1999 and just drove around the country and had adventures and started writing, like kind of doing a blog before that word existed about like traveling around, or life after New York. And I decided I should be a writer, and I got some freelance writing gigs, and I applied to journalism school and got in at the University of Oregon, and also Colorado, but I decided to go to Oregon. And I was in their Masters of Journalism program, which I loved. But while I was there, I realized that I was enjoying my communication classes more than the professional journalism classes. So while there, I completed the program. I got my master's in literary nonfiction, kind of like long nonfiction pieces, like the kind of things you see in the New Yorker magazine or The Atlantic, for example. Anyway, I decided not to be a journalist, applied to PhD programs in communication. I applied only in the West. I'd fallen in love with the West, and I was accepted here at UNM. Got my PhD in communication at UNM in the communication and journalism department. With my PhD, I set out for my first professor job, which was at a small college in Ohio. But I really wanted to move back west. I found a job at a branch of Montana State University. So I lived in Montana. It was the second time. Montana was also the biggest part of where I lived when I was driving around in 1999 to 2000, kind of manufacturers. So I'm back to Montana. I was there for 6 years. Came back here in 2012 for a job as an assistant professor in UNM's communication and journalism department, where I had gotten my own degree 7 years earlier.
What do you remember about UNM back when you had started taking classes here?
Oh, I just loved it.
Was the campus because we're still in Albuquerque? I mean, has it just continued to sprawl and get bigger as far as what we offer here?
Yeah, there are more programs. There's more degree programs than there used to be. There's some new departments. So, for example, just off the top of my head, I can think of things that didn't exist. There is now a Native American Studies department, meaning it offers a master's and PhD degree as well as undergrad. There's a new Chicano Studies department. I believe, I'm not an expert here, but I believe their offering is in the School of Engineering that didn't exist prior. Although it's pretty hard to create a new department. Physically, the campus has in many ways been more modernized. Like the sub is not what it was 20 years ago. It's much nicer. The communication journalism building's got a complete overhaul. So there's been some new building and some upgrades, but basically to me, it feels largely the same. I mean, I loved being here as a grad student, and I fantasized about coming back here as a professor. And while I was living in Montana, as much as I love that, I always said to myself, I want to stay in the Mountain West. And I'd like to be in a city the size of Albuquerque, never dreaming that I would actually come back to Albuquerque. I also see what's happening. Oh, another thing that wasn't here 20 years ago was the College of Population Health, better known as public health. That's a brand new thing. While the med school and the pharmacy school and the nursing school always existed, public health and population health is new here, and that's really important. Probably not the expert in talking about what has changed or been built. I'm just talking about my own experiences. But to me, it still feels like the UNM that I knew and loved as a grad student.
Awesome.
So wait, there's more. Would you like to know about my original connection to ROTC?
Yeah.
Because this was strange too. Not so strange. So as I mentioned, I got my master's in journalism at the University of Oregon. I was there from 2000 to 2002. And one of the projects that we had was we had to find a local subculture and basically kind of embed ourselves with the permission of the subculture for the length of a semester, and then write like a magazine-length piece about that experience. In Eugene, Oregon, a lot of the obvious subcultures, there's a lot of, I would say a lot of progressive or left-wing political groups. Eugene is known for having self-described anarchist groups. So those are all the obvious ones. And I decided that my subculture was going to be Oregon's Army ROTC. Yeah.
Is that just because it was different? Because that's really interesting that you bring that up.
No, seriously, because I also took a class while I was doing this project. I was also taking a class in sociology. department called The Folklore of Subcultures. And it was really about what defines a culture, what defines a subculture. And among the things that are true of any subculture are, subculture will have its own traditions, possibly language, or certainly its own jargon, customs, clothing, ways of life. And I was like, well, I don't know very much about the military, but it certainly appears to me that this might work. And my professor didn't love the idea, but I think for political reasons. I think she really wanted me to, immerse myself in one of the local environmentalist groups. And I was like, well, I think this will be more interesting, especially since all my classmates were doing that. I went to the commanding officer of Oregon's Army ROTC unit, asked him if I could do this, described the project, and he welcomed me with open arms. I was invited to attend classes, go to ceremonies. I spent a weekend at, field training exercise in Central Oregon. To get there, we flew together on a Chinook.
Really? Wow.
I drove a Humvee. I slept in a sleeping bag on the floor of the gymnasium where all the cadets were sleeping. So, but I basically was spending a whole semester, and I got to interview. I was given total access. I interviewed all the cadre, I interviewed all the cadets, and I was just so impressed that it just gave me. This is back in 2001, I want to say. Yeah, probably 2001 or 2002, and it gave me such a positive impression of ROTC and the students that choose it, that when I came to University College here 3 years ago as the director of the liberal arts program and realized, oh, I'm going to be working with ROTC folks, it was just great, because it is just this thing I've had in my head for the last over 20 years, just how terrific ROTC is and how impressive its students are.
Yeah, because most people don't even know what ROTC is, and you getting that opportunity to just see the program in Eugene, like it's pretty awesome. Yeah. And then what became of the article, I guess, whatever you wrote?
I didn't publish it.
Oh, okay.
No, and I probably should have. I probably should have looked for an outlet, but I think by the time it was finished, my focus then, that was around the time I think I decided to apply to PhD programs.
Okay.
So if I remember correctly, I pretty much spent the fall, it was a 2-year program, the master's program. I probably spent that entire summer, the summer between first and second year, and then the fall of the second year, probably working on my grad school applications, because I applied to 5 or 6 different schools.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, and now that you mention it, I probably have it typed on paper in a file cabinet somewhere. I need to go to my office and see if it still exists.
Is there anything surprising that you learned out of that experience?
Oh, absolutely. Everything. I would say, what was surprising in a very good way. Almost all the surprises were good. I had never before met such a group of such responsible, goal-oriented, respectful, organized college students in my life. I had never, because I was a teaching assistant at Oregon. So I was a teaching assistant in one of the advertising classes, since I used to do advertising, so that made sense. And my students were good, but the students I was interacting with during my semester long, immersion or embedding with the ROTC unit there just blew me away. I had never met so many students who were all so responsible and self-motivated and just capable of running things. I can't have walked away from that experience thinking, why can't all college students be this responsible and motivated and goal-oriented and mature? That was probably it's not like that changed a prior misimpression, because this was a brand new impression. It's like, oh, I know this thing that I was not prepared for. I didn't. And also what surprised me was, because I really had a chance to talk to, because it was over several months, I had a chance to have repeated conversations or interviews with individual cadets as well as in a group. And I was also blown away by how different everyone was from each other. I think civilians have a misimpression that everyone in the military is literally uniform. Right? And boy, is that not the case. The people I met were men and women from all over the country, from all political orientations, from all types of families. They had all different reasons for wanting to be in ROTC and then ultimately serve in the Army.
Do you keep in touch with any of them still?
I'm just with one.
Just with one?
One of the cadets were Facebook friends.
Oh, that's really cool. Are they still in the Army or anything?
No, the guy I'm still in touch with, he retired.
Okay.
Because he would have been, I guess, probably in his early 20s at the time. Probably. I think he was also I think he might have been a non-traditional student. So he might have been 25 when everyone else was 19.
Gotcha.
So I think he served for 20 years. And I believe he's retired now.
Cool. All right. After that experience, have you had any other experience before getting to UNM and working with us, with either ROTCs or service members at a college?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm trying to. So the place I taught in Ohio when I left you. So while I was here at UNM as a graduate student, I had nothing to do with ROTC.
Yeah.
And frankly, I'm not even sure if it was on my radar. I probably knew that ROTC existed at UNM, but I didn't have any interaction with any cadets or midshipmen or cadre. And then same thing, the first place I taught was a small college in Ohio. Definitely did not have an ROTC program. And when I was back at Montana State, I was at a branch campus, which I don't think would have, no. So I really didn't have any opportunity to until I came back here. And then even my first 10 years here as a faculty member at UNM, I was just, totally absorbed in the communication and journalism department. I certainly had students who I knew to be cadets or midshipmen because they would be in uniform certain days of the week and I would chat with them. But other than that, no, I didn't have any interactions for my first 10 years as a faculty member with any of the cadre.
Interesting. Okay. And then, because we're part of the university or whatnot, I mean, did you know anything as far as how, when you came here, as far as with the status of the program or how people thought of the program back then?
I'm trying to think. No, it's funny. Okay, so let's say the 10 years before I joined University College, when I was exclusively in communication and journalism department. I don't recall having any discussions with my colleagues about it, or I don't remember. I may have chatted with a couple. If I had students in my classes who were cadets or midshipmen, I probably chatted with them, but I didn't. I kind of just asked them, which branch are you in, or what are you planning on doing, or whatever, where are you from? And that was kind of it. I didn't have any conversations about the program, and I don't remember having any conversations with my communication department colleagues about it. It just never, for good or bad, it just never came up.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. Just because, I don't know, everybody's stuck, or not stuck, everybody's focused on their own sort of thing.
And we're very siloed. It's a large university, and also, for good or bad, the communication and journalism department has its own building, and it's on Central Avenue. It's right at the corner of Central and Yale, so it's not even within. It's on the border. It's not within the campus. So I could just go from the parking lot to my building and back every day, and never set foot on any other part of. I would cross Central Avenue into my building, and then I would cross Central Avenue back to go home without ever setting foot on any other part of campus, except if I had to go to the library, or I went to the cellar for something to eat, or had a meeting. But for the most part, I was in my little silo on an edge of campus. ROTC was not part of my awareness. I knew it existed. I don't know that I ever met any of the cadre. So I'm not sure. And yet, there might have been some occasions where maybe, but no, I have no memories of being involved with ROTC until I joined University College.
And then I think we went over a lot, but what was it like coming back to UNM, since you had been in Montana?
Well, it was weird. I was so excited. I was so excited to get the job here. I couldn't believe I got it. I couldn't believe my luck. And also very excited to be back in Albuquerque, which I really loved when I was here as a grad student. The first year back was weird. It was I felt like I was seeing everything through two pairs of glasses. Like I was seeing things in the moment, but I was also seeing that through the lens of my memory. And it was very disorienting. And also disorienting was being in a communication and journalism building, but none of my friends were there. None of my classmates were there.
Yeah.
Me, they'd all graduated and taken jobs elsewhere. So I'm in the same building where I was for 3 years with none of my classmates or people from the other classes. And roughly 2/3 of the faculty in those 7 years had retired, changed jobs, went elsewhere, died. So even the faculty wasn't the same. And the people that were there that I knew, it was odd. Now they were my professors and now they were my colleagues. So that was weird. So everything about the first year was weird because I was just aware of what I was missing. I wasn't able to really focus on how great it was to be back here. It was oh, but my friends aren't here. And 2/3 of the faculty that I knew loved. So all I focused, we always have a negative bias, right? So of course I was focused whether I wanted to be or not on what I didn't have here. And again, it was just very disorienting. And then after the first year that passed. So from year 2 onward, it's been just great.
And then that's really good to hear. Since you've been here, or since you're in that position, what did you do in communication and journalism as far as, program wise?
Okay.
Is it just teaching or is it?
Oh, teaching and research. So
okay.
I was an assistant professor on a tenure track. And at UNM, for the most part, if you're hired as an assistant professor on a tenure track, that means that you will be spending your first 6 years working on what you need to work on to get tenure and be promoted to associate professor with tenure. At UNM, that means that you are expected to spend as much time and focus on your research as on your teaching. So for that reason, if you're a what's called tenure stream or tenure track assistant professor, you only teach 2 classes a semester because You need to spend all that time that you're not teaching and doing research and writing articles and getting stuff published, getting articles or books published, getting papers accepted for presentation at conferences, and building a research agenda. So that's what I did. Because although it didn't take me 6 years here, when I started here, I was given what's called a 4-year clock because I had taught for 7 years at other universities.
Okay.
So I didn't have to start exactly from zero, but I still did have to teach here for 4 years before I could apply for promotion and tenure. So I just kept doing what I had been doing at Montana State, which is working on various projects. My areas of focus are broadly things having to do with the media. So I don't usually do stuff that has to do with interpersonal communication. And so I'm interested in media studies and political communication and sometimes religious communication. So I'm trying to visualize my resume. So I wrote a bunch of articles that got published in journals. I wrote a bunch of papers that I presented at conferences. I wrote chapters that appeared in books. Like in academia, you can write your own book, and that's called a monograph if you're the sole author. But also what's very common is for one or two people, let's say, to do to edit what's called an edited collection. So that it might be a book that has 12 chapters about a theme, and each chapter is contributed by a different scholar. So I actually had edited one of those and co-edited one of those when I was at Montana State. And I'd also written chapters for other people's books, and I kind of just did more of the same. And so my stuff that I worked on was everything from media theory. And one thing I got really excited about was looking at how certain people or media organizations, whether it's magazines or TV networks, how they not only communicate about whatever they're studying, whatever they write about, whether Sports Illustrated is about sports or Vogue is about fashion, for example. But I was looking at people who run those organizations who actually directly influence the worlds that they cover. So how has ESPN changed, not only how sports are broadcast or consumed, but how has ESPN changed sports? And for example, an easy example is ESPN created the X Games. So here we have a media entity that is not just reporting on sports, but creating one. Or I use Vogue as an example. I wrote an article about Vogue because Anna Wintour, the infamous or famous editor-in-chief of Vogue, she actually tells fashion designers what to produce. Design this. She tells stores what products to take. Running the fashion industry, even though she's not a designer or marketer, she's an editor, stuff like that. There's a lot of weird, interesting connections between, let's say, and even now this came up last week, between ESPN and the NFL. Like in many ways, ESPN in some ways affects the way that professional sport leagues operate, or at the very least, when their games are played. Like Monday Night Football is on ABC because ABC made that happen. Politics. So that's what my dissertation looked at. I looked at how in 2004, how George W. Bush and John Kerry, the presidential candidates, talked about religion or faith in God on the campaign trail, which is not something most American presidential candidates have done. And so I've done a bunch of stuff on religion and religious communication within political communication. Lately, I'm working on stuff about anti-Semitism. I'm Jewish. I'm looking at anti-Semitism and how anti-Semitism is or is not dealt with in the media. That's something I'm working on right now, actually. So almost everything I do has to do with the media in some form, but the media have changed. So I've done stuff on websites, for example. I wrote what was supposed to be a chapter in the book on basically neo-Nazi and white nationalist websites and how they talk about Jews. So hoping to publish that. I wrote it as a chapter for a book. The publisher canceled the book. So I have this fully written chapter that I'm going to try to turn into an article that I send to a journal, like the Journal of Media and Religion, something like that.
Cool. No, that's awesome to hear about all the different ways like you've been able to write and publish. I think that one thing about being an Army officer is like there's things that we want to write or stuff like that. Half the time it comes down to, finding that time to like, hey, you have your job on one hand, but then also just, hey, you need to, study, you need to learn, things like that. But that's really cool, especially talking about the ESPN or like how different people, or what do you call it? Yeah, people who are in a community change that community, such as like with football and things like that.
Yeah, no, especially because one of the golden rules of journalism is the story's not about you.
Right, yeah.
You're not part of the story. You don't insert yourself into the story. And yet, for example, and again, go back to Anna Wintour, she's definitely an exception. She's at one end of the spectrum. But for example, like Moon Arledge, who was the head of ABC Sports for decades, he very much changed the way that not only the Olympics are broadcast, but the way the Olympics are shaped and which sports are highlighted. I mean, so he worked very closely with the U.S. and I think U.S. Olympic Committee So, so here we have again. So ABC Sports is not supposed to be in the business of changing the way the sports work. Yes, any sports organization certainly changes the way that sports are covered and broadcast, but so ABC Sports changed much about the way the Olympics are shaped. Rupert Murdoch, who is most famous in this country for being the head of Fox News Channel and News Corp more broadly, owned quite a number of sports teams and sports leagues in places like Australia and New Zealand. When I forget, I don't remember the name of a league. But he actually changed as the owner, as both a media mogul and an owner of various sports franchises in Australia and New Zealand. He changed the schedules. Like here is when rugby will be played in New Zealand. Here's when the season will be, or making the games shorter. Or he in some ways changed cricket in India to make it more television friendly, more exciting. So it's like, are media people supposed to do that? Are editors and media owners supposed to actually insert themselves into a sports league or into the world of fashion or into the world of art? I mean, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, totally. Moving forward, at what point then did you get to be a dean here at the university?
So, well, really, two or three things really kind of propel me in that direction, even though I never wanted to be a dean.
Okay.
All right.
I was wondering how, even sorry to interrupt.
No.
Is it everybody's dream as a professor or assistant professor? Hey, I'm going to climb the ladders to get to that dean spot.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
No. But most people, let's say, most people who want to get tenure and move up in that rank, what they want is to move up within the ranks. So let's say you start as an assistant professor. You don't have to be an assistant professor. You could also be something called a lecturer, which basically means you teach.
Okay.
And you do a lot more teaching. You do more teaching and more service, but there's no research expectation. And there's a hierarchy of that too. But people who, let's say, get their PhD and decide they really want to do research as much as they want to do teaching. And so UNM is a good place for that because we are a research institution. So the goal is, let's say when you're an assistant professor, you spend your first 6 years trying to, also you're teaching, you're also trying to teach sometimes it's as many different classes as you can to show how diversified your talents are. And of course, you want to be a good teacher because your students' evaluations of you are very much taken into consideration when you go up for promotion. But the focus, let's say, at a place like UNM is getting published, is being a known, published, prolific scholar. And then when you apply for tenure and promotion during your 6th year, and if you get it, then you're an associate professor. And then if you want to, in or after your 6th. Oh, by the way, if you don't get tenure and promotion, then you're gone. So it's
I've heard about that.
But typically, it's like if you don't get the promotion and tenure, like at UNM, you have one last year. You have what's called a terminal year. And you say, no, we can't give you tenure and promotion, but you're not gone yet. You have one more year here to teach and do whatever you want to do and look for another job. So if you get promoted to associate professor, you can stay an associate professor for the rest of your life. There's no up or out on that one. But if you want to, you can apply to the next highest rank, which is simply professor, or what's known as full professor. And that's what the vast majority of academics want to do. They want to climb to the highest academic rank, but are not necessarily looking for a job in administration. In fact, that's the last thing they want. And having done, I was in advertising agency management and I left it. I was tired of it. So when I came to academia, the last thing I wanted to do was be in management again. Mm-hmm. More reluctantly, right around the time that I was promoted, when I got promotion and to associate professor with tenure, our department chair left the university. No one else in our department wanted to be chair. It was kind of a last minute thing. We wound up starting a school year. I remember it was the fall of 2016, and we didn't have a chair.
But what does that mean if you just don't have a chair? Is it just like somebody's sort of not managing where everybody's going? How dire is that?
It's dire.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Because the chair oversees the department's budget, chair oversees hiring and firing. The chair is the person that the staff people, like the department administrator and communication journalism, even AV tech person. The chair is all the staff members' boss. And the chair oversees, among other things, for example, the teaching schedule, who's going to teach what and in what rooms and at what times. You can't not have a chair. Started the fall semester without a chair. And then the dean and the associate dean of the College of Arts and Sciences called a faculty meeting, came to us and said, you guys got to figure this out among yourselves. What had happened was in the prior year, we had a search for a chair. And the search failed. That's what it's called. We'd identified 3 finalists, and ultimately, when we went to finalist number 1 to make an offer, they're like, no, I don't want to after all. And so did number 2, and so did number 3. And then all of a sudden, it kind of fell back to us to identify a chair from among our own ranks. And 3 of us, including me, said, fine. So what we did for one, this is very unusual. So for the 16-17 academic year, I was one of 3 co-chairs. So 3 of us co-ran the department, which worked, but it was not a permanent solution. And then later, so then during that academic year, when we started having discussions about, okay, we're going to have one chair for the fall of 17 who wants to do it. Basically, ultimately, I was the only person. I was like, okay, fine. Kind of like, it's like I'm applying for volunteers and I was the only one that didn't fit. So I reluctantly, and then there still had to be a vote, and I had to be elected by a supermajority. The dean decreed that it was just going to be a yes or no vote, but I had to get 75% of the votes. And I got like 95. One person voted against me. I broke my heart. So then I became the chair of that department in the fall of 17. And what helped was, even though it's not what I wanted to do, because I had been in management for 17 years in the ad agency world, I had dealt with budgets before. I had dealt with personnel before. I had dealt with schedules before. I had dealt with personnel issues before. Like all the things that most academics have never been trained in and don't want to be. Right? I mean, most academics, they want to be professors. They want to do their research and teach their classes. And that's the last thing they want to be as a department chair.
Is there a special degree path, or is there just training you get?
No.
Okay.
Not really.
Neither. Okay.
I mean, what you get is when you become a chair, so let's just say at UNM, there is a new chair's orientation. So for example, Lieutenant Colonel Lacey, who is the brand new commanding officer of Air Force and therefore the chair of aerospace studies, he just spent 2 days last week at UNM's new chair training, as well as yesterday at new faculty training, because he's both. In most cases, a chair of a department rose through the ranks of that department, so they're not like a new faculty member. They're just new as a chair. Whereas Colonel Lacey, he's new to UNM, so he's both a new chair and anyways. So there's like 2 day chair training, and then there's what I call chair school through the first or sometimes the first or second years. There's like monthly workshops and monthly trainings on specific issues. But really, you just kind of have to learn. You learn as you go. So all that, like I said, I mean, I still had to learn UNM's bureaucracy and processes. But as a faculty member, I was aware of some of them. So I would say that I was an anomaly. Most department chairs, most faculty members have never worked in another industry in general. And in truth, though, I mean, to some degree, I was definitely an anomaly, for example, in the communication department, in that not only had I had this prior, again, I wasn't the only person, but, among when I was hired, I was one of 8 people who was hired for the communication department that year. And I was, maybe one of our journalism lecturers, she'd actually been a journalist, or she still was a working journalist. But among us who were tenure track, my 4 tenure track colleagues like me only had been in academia. None of them had ever had a job at anything else in their lives. So I was unusual. I was also unusual because I got my degree here. Also, I was older than they were. Still am probably. But also, I wanted to be more involved with the university, whereas I think a lot of people here who teach are not, and this is not a slang, just in my observation, I think a lot of people who are professors in their field are not necessarily interested really, or like in a big way of knowing how the university as a whole works or knowing what other people are up to. And I wanted to be, so I volunteered my first semester as a communication assistant professor here. I volunteered to be our department's delegate, department senator to the faculty senate. And one reason I did that was I wanted to meet people from every other department in school and college on its campus. And I wanted to know how the campus worked. And no one else in my department at the time, and it was like, okay, good. No one else, every department at the time needed to send a delegate to be a senator. So I was C&J senator. No one else wanted it. So then it was a 2-year term, and when it was up, I was like, I'll do it again, but I don't want to, and no one else wanted to do it. It wasn't like, if more than one person had been interested, there wouldn't have vote. There was no vote. It was like, fine, Dave, want to do it again? Power to you. So I got to meet a lot of people from across the campus in every, so I met people from engineering and architecture and the law school, whatever. And then one thing I love about and then when I was department chair, then I was in a meeting twice a month with all of my fellow arts and sciences chairs. So I'm friends still with people in the physics department and the biology department and the philosophy department, which normally that wouldn't happen. But I'm really interested in what they're up to, and I'm interested in lots of different fields of study. And I was really interested in learning, I got to know how the College of Arts and Sciences worked. And the College of Arts and Sciences is half of this university in terms of budget, in terms of faculty, in terms of number of students. So if you know arts and sciences, you're pretty plugged. Again, that doesn't mean that you know the School of Engineering or Architecture or Fine Arts or Business, but whatever. And now as dean, one thing I love about my job is I'm in a meeting twice a month with the other 15 deans. And the nature of university college is such that everything we do is interdisciplinary. Everything we do serves at least 1, if not 5 or 6 other units around campus. So we have direct connections to North Campus, which is the Health Sciences Center. I'm working with you guys. Global National Security Studies is another interdisciplinary program that has its fingers in, or that has components from, obviously, the School of Engineering and the college, the College of Arts and Sciences, things like history and political science and sociology. So I just love that a big part of my job puts me in direct contact with every other unit on this and now the branch campuses. I work directly with the 4 UNM branch campuses, chancellors, those are the people that basically presidents in effect, as well as their deans of instruction. And I love that. I love being a part of the university and not only in my silo.
Yeah, totally. Because especially just being a part of communications or whatnot, just I feel like if you're in your own silo, you're only learning or trying to do things within. I mean, have you seen a lot of partnerships just develop out of like, oh, hey, we're doing this, like we could help out with.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, and in fact, the university encourages cross-disciplinary research. So, for example, if communication is very much a mongrel discipline. I mean, even though the study of persuasion or rhetoric goes back to Aristotle for 3,000 years ago. Communication was not a university, or certainly media studies was not a university discipline until, let's say, the early 1900s, World War I. But then it grew out of, in many ways, it grew out of anthropology, which really informs intercultural communication. We have people that do, some of my colleagues in C&J do health communication, which obviously has direct connections to the health professions. My stuff has direct connections with political science or religious studies or sociology. Some of my C&J colleagues do work on gender or race. So direct connections to things like our Chicana Studies Office or department, or the Native American Studies Department or the African American Studies Department. So communication has all these, and if you're interested in interpersonal communication, well, that's psychology, right? So probably our discipline more than others is interdisciplinary, but even so, you wouldn't necessarily have to spend a whole lot of time outside of our building to do your research, unless you're working on a project, and a lot of my colleagues do. So, I mean, I do stuff with colleagues in political science probably more than any other department.
Going back to sort of, piecing the department together as far as like the university studies, the thing you had to write when you were working with ROTCs again, what was that experience like? Because you had delved back into them. Are you asking like the colonels or whatnot to write their own piece?
So, for example, one of the chapters in the so-called self-study, the document that you write in advance of the site visit, and then you send this document to the reviewers before they come here, so they get to, anyways. So one of the chapters it's like a 10-chapter book that our Office of Assessment and APR dictates. One of the chapters in the book is about assessment. How do you measure your student success? And so I spent a lot of time working with the commanding officers, and in some cases the seconds or even thirds in command, learning about, because you guys, of course, do your own assessments. So I incorporated all of that. One of the chapters is about curriculum. What does your college teach? What are your courses? What are your majors? What are your minors? How are they structured? How many credits are they? So I had to learn all about aerospace studies and military science and naval science. So I basically had to learn the academic departments here, because that went into the book. What else? There's quite a bit in the book that looks at enrollment trends. What are your enrollment numbers been? Your retention numbers, like how many students stay after the first year? Do you graduation numbers? So just a lot of the statistics I have to look at. Also the demographic makeup of each program. I met in the preparation phase. I met with each of the commanding officers and their seconds in command to describe, here's what ATO is all about. So here's what the book, here's the table of contents, here's what it's going to look like. I'm going to need from you this piece for chapter 3 and this piece for chapter 7 and this piece for chapter 9, whatever. Oh, one of the chapters is about facilities. How many offices or buildings do you own? What do they consist of? Where are they located? What is the square footage? I mean, really. So I spent a lot of time while I was writing, the year that I was writing and being in charge of this project was also the year that this building, the ROTC headquarters, and so that.
Wow, yeah.
That got in here. So at the time I was interviewing and working with the commanding officers in 3 different locations. No one had moved yet. By the time the book was written, and that'll happen at the end of that academic year. And also just learning about the classes that y'all teach.
Taking your ROTC experience from what you had already done back at Oregon, I mean, did you see any sort of a difference? Did you see a bigger program here?
Much bigger here. I could be wrong. My memory was, at least at the time, let's say 2001, I believe that Army was the only Oregon ROTC program. I don't think Oregon. Gotcha. And I'm not sure if they do. I don't know. I don't know if they do have since added, Air Force and or Naval. So all I had been exposed to was Army. And so here I was dealing with, of course, and that was the thing too. For me, that was when I really came to appreciate the differences across the programs. That even though, yes, there are obviously similar goals, similar missions, in all cases, you're commissioning officers for a branch of the U.S. military. Your structures are different from each other. The way you do scholarships is different from each other. The way you do recruitment is different from each other. Whether just the fact that, for example, among the things I learned was that if you're not an ROTC student on this campus, you can still do the Navy's or the Air Force's minor but not yours. You can't
minor in Army's military science.
You can't do the Army's military science minor unless you're a cadet. However, you can do Air Forces and Navies. Go figure. I always say this to the commanders, and they look at me like I'm crazy. Like, so my thinking is, like, my question is, like, why isn't there more uniformity? Why isn't there some guide or some bureaucracy that is the same? And like, well, because we're three separate organizations. Yeah, but even at the Pentagon, there is a Joint Chiefs of Staff. There are moments when all y'all are in the same room talking to each, and I realize you guys do talk to each other, especially now that you're in the same building. But at the Pentagon, there are moments and an organization that brings you all together. Why isn't there a Joint Chiefs of Staff for ROTC? And when I say, people look at me like I'm crazy. Why isn't there a Joint Chiefs of Staff in the ROTC? Why can't, and maybe you do, I don't know. I mean, I've met the head of Naval ROTC twice. I've been to a conference for Naval ROTC University administrators at Fort Knox. I met the general who's in charge of Army ROTC. I've met higher ups in Air Force, but I don't think the number one person. Do the number one people ever talk to each other? And if so, why not?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll have to look more into that. I think it's mainly because we all have different recruiting goals and programs, but I don't think they do talk just because, yeah, again, it comes down to I only care about our program or something like that for the branches as far as recruiting. But I'll have to look into that more.
Like there is no head. There is no national head of ROTC or ROTCs.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas there is a chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and there's a Secretary of Defense.
Yeah. Super interesting. From that experience, did you get any offers at least to like do any field training or to come see the program?
Oh, yeah. Oh, no.
Okay.
It has been a complete open door here. And so here, this was a similarity to my experience, even just as a journalism student at Oregon 20-something years ago. I attend every commissioning ceremony here. I attend the awards dinners or the awards events. And I've attended classes. I will probably be coming to, I know there's something going on with Naval here this weekend. I think it's like a weekend-long training for I think especially for the incoming midshipmen. Colonel Cunningham has invited me and any other member of my team to what y'all are doing in Santa Fe.
Yeah.
FTX. And
that'll be a really good opportunity to come see it a program again.
Sergeant Sanger invited me last year and I took him up on the offer to do, I guess, Army Day, which is mostly for Albuquerque and other high school teachers and guidance counselors, but this whole day, which largely takes place at the National Guard. And it also includes a helicopter ride above the city, which I did last year.
Really? How was that opportunity?
It was really cool, like riding in a helicopter with no doors.
Was it a Black Hawk?
I don't recall.
Okay.
I know that I was strapped in, so I couldn't fall out of my seat because here was the door.
Because you said Chinook last time, so that's why I was like, oh, that's really interesting.
No, this is much smaller. Much smaller. I think there are maybe 2 of us at a time or 4 of us.
Okay.
So we had to do it in shifts. And it was like taking off from ABQ, from the airport, / Portland. It was definitely an Army helicopter. And then we did it in groups, so maybe 2 or 4 have to be accepted. I said, sure, sign me up. So I gave him whatever information he needed. Again, he had to apply for me to be a guest. And so he had to write a little thing about me. And here's like why I was worthy of going. Here are the various things I've done to support Army ROTC. And that was accepted. And that was, so several months ago, I knew that I would be going, which is pretty cool. Because I guess it was limited. There were maybe 40 of us. I don't think maybe, I don't know if that's a set number or something like that, but clearly it would have been it would have been unwieldy with more people than that. And then he also asked me if I would be interested in doing, the parachute jump. And I said, yes. So I had to fill out more paperwork for that, all about like my height and my weight. And
had you jumped out of a plane before? Oh, really? That's awesome.
No, I'm 63. I never felt like I did this in my life. And it's not the kind of thing I normally do. Yeah. Like, I'm not afraid of heights. Like, I'm flying. I like being on the top of big buildings, looking down. I mean, as long as there's a rail, I know.
Right.
I was like, oh, what the hell? It's like, if I'm ever going to do this, I mean, if I'm ever going to jump out of an airplane and, with a parachute, I think the best way to do it would be tethered to someone who does it for a living and is one of the best in the world. So that was like, I'm not going to die. So then at first I was an alternate. I was an alternate jumper. And then it wasn't until maybe 2 weeks before the trip that I found out that I was now approved to
Awesome.
So I'm guessing someone dropped out.
Yeah.
There were people in the original list of guests who were not there, who just couldn't go.
Oh, things happen.
Experiences. So I got moved up. So I was like, well, now that I've moved up, I got to do it. Yeah. And I also did rappelling. That was fun because, so the parachute, the skydiving day, we were completely separate from cadets. It didn't take place at Fort Knox. It was at Elizabethtown Airport nearby.
Okay.
But it's a little private airport. But everything else we did at Fort Laser Conference is like learning all about naval ROTC and what's new. And there's a field, and it's always held at a university. It's a different place every year. It's always a university that has a naval ROTC program. So 2 years ago, I went to the one, it was at University of Arizona in Tucson. Last year was University of Nebraska. And the head of naval ROTC is there. He comes, and he also brings a couple of his civilian employees or retired military who work at naval ROTC headquarters. And we learn about naval ROTC, and we meet the cadets or midshipmen at whatever university is hosting. This year it's going to be at Villanova. And there's a field trip. There's like a field trip to something military related. Last year we actually went to Air Force Base at Offutt, where Stratcom is headquartered, just outside of Omaha. So it wasn't a Navy site, but it was certainly, it was Air Force / all military. So that was pretty cool. And I think I'm not going this year because I've already been to it twice. So I'm sending one of my associate deans. This year, I think that whatever the field trip will be Navy / military related sites in Philadelphia. So I'd done that. So this was quite different. This was a little bit of that. And there were 40 of us from all different schools and universities, but there were a lot of professors in military science there and there were just lots of cadre there, and there were like hundreds, thousands of cadets there.
What do you remember? So did you, and how many days long was it?
So we had to arrive on a Tuesday night,
where
we had like a welcome reception and where we learned a few things, but it was mostly a get to know each other. There was food and drinks and stuff. So we were staying at a hotel. So some of the people from Cadet Command came down from Fort Knox to meet us and say hello. The 40 of us were divided into 5 different squadrons, basically, each of which was led by a professor of military science from some university. So I happened to be in a group that was led by the PMS from University of Colorado Springs. One group was led by the PMS from Princeton, and one was from South Carolina State, et cetera, et cetera. So there were a lot so they were all in uniform, of course. Once we got to Fort Knox, anyway, so we stayed in a hotel in Louisville, and we were bused to Fort Knox. So we got there Tuesday night, and we had various things at various locations in Fort Knox on Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday was rappelling day. So if we wanted to, we could rappel off the 62-foot tower. So I would say about 2/3 of us did that, including me. And to get to the top of the tower, you walk up this big, long, multi-level staircase, and we're going up the stairs in a line. And we got in training first. We got in our equipment, our tethers, and we learned how to use the ropes. And so we were going up the staircase, and right next to us were cadets going up the staircase to rappel. They were being evaluated.
One question I had was, so they had brought in marketing and things like that. Did anything surprise you as far as the way the Army markets or anything like that? Because you had been in marketing before.
Yeah, it's true. So, it's interesting. For example, so obviously the highlight of the week for those of us who chose to, anyway, half a week, right? We arrived on Tuesday night, and those of us who did the parachute jump, that was on Friday. So so it was like 2.5 days if you did the jump, and 1.5, whatever, or maybe 3.5 days, I guess. At any rate, so when we got, so back a step. So on Thursday, that was the day we had the meeting in a huge conference room in the Patton Museum. So during that meeting, we learned a lot about social media, and there were various Army, Cadet Command social media people there, as well as like the head of marketing communications. And so they talked about ways that we could, in fact, boost the visibility of our own unit as well as Army ROTC generally through our own social media and which hashtags we should use, et cetera, et cetera. And then the next day I think 13 of us did a parachute jump out of maybe 40, and maybe everyone else already went home. Before, during, and after the jump, we were on camera. So we had our training first. We were like in an office at the Elizabethtown Airport, kind of office conference room, basically. It was a conference room. So in the conference room, we watched a video, so the Golden Knights ran that day. They ran the day. So one of the Golden Knights showed us the video, talked about how to sign the millions of waivers in which we promised not to sue anyone. I'm not going to. So I swore that I would not sue the Army, the Golden Knights, Cadet Command, Elizabethtown Airport, and 10 other entities that I will not sue, because of course I was doing this voluntarily. No one was making me jump out of an airplane. So I basically signed a million releases. We all did, and we watched the video. We got trained, and then when it was time, we were called up in groups of 2 or 3. And we were paired with a parachutist. And as we were walking from this conference room out of the building across the field to the plane, a Golden Knight videographer would interview us like, "Hey, David, how are you feeling? Are you excited? Are you scared? What messages do you have for the folks back home? Whatever." So I'm standing next to my parachutist as we're heading toward the plane and whatever. And then we get in the plane. And so in the plane was for whatever reason, my flight, there were just 2 of us. 2 of us university administrators and our accompanying parachutist and our accompanying videographers. So 6 of us in the plane, in addition to the pilots. While we're in the plane flying up, then my videographer starts, shooting me and my parachutist as I'm basically literally sitting in his lap to get tethered to connected to him. And as we're kind of crab walking from our seats, because you can't stand up while you're connected, as we're walking toward the door, and then the videographer jumps parallel to us. And then he is taking still photos and videos all the way down, which is really cool. So then once we get back once we land from the jump, and then we go back into the office in the building at the airport, 5 minutes later, someone else from the Golden Knights comes out and says, "Hey, David, come here and bring your phone." And then I bring my phone, and he downloads 70 photos and 5 or 10 videos onto my phone. And then in addition to the videos, when I look at my phone, when I look at the photos, there's like a million photos because, he's snapping the photos with his teeth, which I thought was really cool. Right? So
really?
On his helmet, his camera is on his helmet, and he has something in his mouth. It's kind of like the mouth thing, like for a camelback. And so he's biting, click.
I didn't even realize that was a thing.
His hands are free. His hands are free because he's parachuting too.
Right.
So his hands are free free falling so he's free falling with us, directly next to us, and then he's parachuting with us. So his hands are free, and he's operating his camera with a bite stick. So a lot of the photos are so close together that when you play them, when you scan through them on your phone, they look like a video. And there's also so the video content matches the still frame mostly. So when you get your photos and videos downloaded, along with the photos and videos of you with your parachutist and whatever, are also, here's a slide about how to publicize, how to promote Army ROTC, how to promote, use this hashtag. There's like 6 slides all about built in to the pictures of me, all about promoting on our social media.
And how was the experience at all? Because did you just jump once, or how many times?
Oh, yeah. No, I don't think anyone did twice, but there was enough time there because I think there were fewer of us than were expected. Like I said, only 13 of us did the jump out of a group of maybe 40. So some of the PMSs that were there said, "Hey, I want to go." So they went too.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Some of them some of them maybe had never done it or had just not done it in 20 years. Yeah, that was cool. So some of the folks, so I think, the guy who was from Auburn University, so that was pretty cool. And they were just great.
Yeah. What happened from there? Did they was that your last day pretty much?
That was the last set. Yeah. So then they bussed us back to Louisville where we were staying. And then I went to the airport where I sat for 8 hours because my flight was delayed. Horrible storms. So Louisville was deluged with thunderstorms, as was Dallas, where I was flying to get my connection home. So that was the only unpleasant part, was that my flight home, by the time I got to Dallas, it was 1 a.m. instead of 10 p.m. So of course I missed my flight to Albuquerque. So I spent the night at the Dallas airport hotel, and American Airlines paid for the whole thing. It was like, before I landed, here's your hotel voucher, here's your Uber voucher, here's your meal voucher. So at least they tried to make it somewhat painless. Yeah, that was the most, Yeah. The other thing I did was, on rappelling day, the other death-defying thing we got to do, and only maybe 8 of us or 10 of us did it, was go into the so-called gas chamber.
Okay.
That was pretty, but also completely voluntary.
What was that experience like? Did they just bring you in?
So it's all about, first, Robbie, and explain to us, this is one of the things that the cadets here have to do. So you're going to be doing almost what they do. So they explained there's this building, kind of like a small house, and it had windows. It was nice, so you didn't feel claustrophobic. I said, this is how the cadets get trained on how to use a gas mask and how to trust it. So we learned how to put it on, how to take it off, how to breathe. So first we practiced outside, just putting it on, taking it off, and then when it was on, breathing and making sure we could hear, even though when you have the gas mask on, it's kind of hard to hear, because also it's hard to be heard
Mm-hmm.
because you have a mask on your mouth. But anyway, so first we got used to outside, and then we kind of marched in as a stack into and they explained to us when the cadets do it, they basically said the gas that you'll be exposed to is it's like riot gas. It's not, yes, it's going to be painful and annoying, but it's not going to damage you. You will not get sick. You're not going to be poisoned. And they explain that when the cadets do it, they basically, I don't know how the gas is deployed or diffused. They basically say, let's say we open a can of the gas and they go in when it's fresh. You guys are going to be going in. There was a group of cadets that was here an hour ago. So we're not going to be opening a fresh can for you, but there's plenty of residue. It will not be pretty. So we learned how to use, and we walked in, and immediately I was wearing a t-shirt. Immediately the back of my neck started.
But yeah, well, it sounds like you had an awesome trip at Fort Knox, especially getting to experience all of that.
Yeah, and then jumping out of, I would say that the parachute jumping experience, like I knew I didn't have any rational fears, by which I mean I was never afraid that I would die, that I would break my head, that I would break my leg. It was more like, and I'm not afraid of heights, as I said, and I'm not afraid to fly. But in this flight, as we're flying up to 12,500 feet, we're very steep ascent rather. And it was as I'm looking out the window, I'm like, I'm going to be jumping out of this thing? What? Anyways, so then of course I get tethered to the parachutist. And that was, it's like, oh my God, I'm really doing this. And the other team that was on a plane, they went first. I got to see one of my colleagues, attached to his parachutist and his video, and we followed almost immediately. But everything, just like at the rappelling tower, like before I stepped off, everything on my body was saying, don't do it, don't do it. Like, it's like, because like our lizard brains, right? It's like our brains are wired to protect ourselves, right? And jumping off a 60-foot tower or jumping out of a plane at 12,000 feet is not what we're supposed to do. And so as we're approaching the door, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to die or, oh, I'm going to break my leg. It wasn't like a rational fear. It was just like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Like everything was in me. And I probably wouldn't have done it if I'd been solo, frankly. I probably would have just chickened out. But because I was attached to someone and he was behind me, kind of, and also the videographer was in front of me saying, come on, David, come on, go. And so we just, and then once I'm out of the plane, I wasn't scared. I was overwhelmed. It is the most overwhelming sensation. And I said to the parachutist, I kind of feel like I'm in a dream. Like I felt like semi-conscious. And maybe that's your brain protecting by sort of dissociating you from the experience. Because it was like I couldn't comprehend what was happening. Like on some level, like I knew I had jumped out of a plane with a parachutist, and the parachute's going to be deployed in a minute or two, and I'm free falling, and I'm in Kentucky. I know all those things, but I kind of felt semi-conscious, or like I was in a dream, because a part of my brain couldn't make sense of this experience, and it was like nothing I'd ever done before. Like I've been in lots of airplanes in my life, but never outside of an airplane at 12,000 feet. And never free falling. And also what I wasn't prepared for was how many times we changed direction. Like when I watched the video, like before the free fall, or during the free fall rather, before the parachute was deployed, we're kind of spinning. It was very windy, of course. I mean, it's always windy at that altitude, I don't know. But we're spinning, and then sometimes we're looking up, and sometimes we're looking down, and sometimes we're horizontal, like parallel to the ground. And then of course, when the parachutist deploys the parachute, then you're shooting up and you're vertical. So you're constantly changing your orientation to the ground. And so, but sometimes I couldn't tell literally which end is up. I couldn't tell when the parachute was deployed and you shoot up, then it's clear we're vertical. My feet are toward the ground, my head is toward the sky. But then once we're parachuting down, the nice thing is all of a sudden it's silent. So you can actually talk to each other, and there's no wind or very little. But then also we weren't just going down with our bodies in a vertical position. Again, sometimes we're horizontal, sometimes we're kind of swooping. And I even said to my parachutist, I said, I know I'm not going to throw up, but I get a little queasy. Could we just swoop a little less? But we really couldn't, because I guess he had to do this.
Oh, really?
I guess in order to have a more of a controlled descent.
Right.
Yeah. Like we weren't just like dropping.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. So I understood it, but I was like, can we just swoop a little bit less? And it was really cool. And all of us up were there. And of course, we had practiced how to land.
Okay.
And we were told, of course, in the training, your parachutist, he will land on, like he'll come down to an angle, and and I don't know how these guys do it. He will take all the impact on his feet and legs. Do not, as the passenger, do not put your feet down.
Okay.
If you put your feet down, you will break your ankles.
Wow.
So you have to keep your knees up and your feet up. So we learned that. And then as we were parachuting, my guy said to me, let's practice the landing. Okay, right now, because of course you're in a flight suit, grab the knees of your flight suit pants, pull up your knees by the suit, and keep your feet up, because that's how we're going to land. And then as we got closer to Earth, he said, okay, knees up, feet up. And so as we land, his feet, he's on an angle, he's absorbing all the impact. And then after maybe a moment or two, then all of a sudden we're sitting and we're going bump, bump, bump. And it's on grass. We had 1 or 2 bumps on the grass on our butts, and it didn't hurt because it's grass. It was a thick, grassy field. And then we're done. So the impact, there's no impact to me. It was all to him. So, and he does this 12 times a day. I don't know what his knees are like at this point. He's been doing this for 10 years, but power to him. But I don't know how these guys absorb all the impact. I mean, obviously the parachute is deployed, so it's not like, so there's his impact is being slowed somewhat, but still.
So airborne school, what I've been through, you're dropping from way less, but it's all static. So like when you jump out of the plane, it just deploys for you. So it is interesting getting that different, like hearing your entire experience. It's really awesome. Just like all of that happening. But yeah, from that experience, I mean, so a lot of student or faculty members, not sure about ROTC. Like, have you seen, or do you have any recommendations on how to get, maybe the faculty who doesn't know about us, or maybe us who don't know that much about the faculty, like how to get more interaction?
Yeah, I wanted to get in. So for example, like even so we get in yesterday, day before we shot this, yesterday was new faculty orientation day. So I don't think there were any new, I don't think Army ROTC here has any new faculty this year, but Air Force and Navy do. So several members and new members of the Air Force and Navy cadre went through a day of new faculty orientation, and then there was a reception at the end of the day that the president throws. And so I attended that, and there was the new commanding officer of Air Force, and there were 2 people from Navy who were new or didn't get a chance to do this last year. And so I was introducing them all to my fellow deans and to other people. I'm going to have, and this definitely came out of the Fort Knox Senate. I talked to the Associate Vice Provost who kind of does trainings and meetings throughout the year for all associate deans and department chairs. I asked him if one or more of the commanding officers and I could come to, and the answer is yes, we're going to do it at one of the meetings in the spring semester, if we could come to one of these meetings at which all department chairs from across the campus and all associate deans meet. So we're going to come and we're going to talk about ROTC broadly, not only Army, but ROTC, what ROTC is. Here are some of the issues. Of course, obviously, as associate deans and department chairs, you oversee faculty members who have UNM ROTC cadets and midshipmen in their classes. But they probably they don't know what ROTC is in many cases. They don't understand that these are UNM students who also have an additional job. That's the best way to think about it. And here's some things they may be going through, the things that they have to do, assignments, out of town, field trainings.
Yeah, totally.
And so we're going to, this is my job. This is part of my job, or at least I see it as part of my job, is to not only serve, to serve both ways as a liaison between ROTC and the rest of campus. So we're going to be meeting, and maybe I will also, I'll also volunteer. I'll also say, hey, if department chairs and associate deans, would you like any of us to come to your department meetings or your college meetings? We will be happy to do so, because there are certain parallels to student athletes who also have another job and who are gone, frankly, a whole lot more from campus because they have a whole lot more away games than cadets and midshipmen have trainings during the academic year. And the university is all set up to prepare for that and to work with faculty members who have student athletes in their classes and working with them so that they don't miss assignments or that they can make up just things like that, for example. And there isn't a mechanism in place that's similar for ROTC. So that's something I want to work on this year.
That sounds awesome. And I hope we just keep in touch and go from there. Dean Weiss, do you have any sort of, the school year is about to start. Do you have any suggestions or recommendations or advice for our new students as we're about to kick off the year?
I guess one piece of advice would be, my assumption is that you guys, the cadre, do a terrific job because you're always training the cadets, and not only in military science, but also just in leadership, and also just what it means to be an officer, what it means to be a military member in a civilian world. And so the students as cadets and midshipmen are already going through that, like what it's like to have a uniform in a world in which people are mostly not in uniform. Obviously, if you're a UNM ROTC member, you are a UNM student, right? You are that, and at the same time, you have this dual identity. So I guess my advice would be, I'm sure that new and returning cadets already know that you are representing you are representing ROTC, you are representing the Army, or in the case of Air Force and Navy. So you're already ambassadors. Advice that you probably don't need is remember that you're an ambassador and be a good ambassador. And also bear in mind that you are a UNM student with all the rights and responsibilities and privileges of any other UNM student. And if anyone is getting in your way or giving you a hard time for being an ROTC member, let your commanding officers know and let me know. I'm here for that. And don't be afraid. Yes, I mean, this is the real world. As a military member, you will face discrimination, rudeness, rejection in certain social settings. And sadly, you may find that to be true with some of your fellow students and sadly some faculty members. It is my job to minimize that, to respond to it, and to hopefully make it not happen. I can't control the world, but if someone, especially if it's a UNM employee, whether it's a faculty member or a staff member, is in any way acting in a way that you think is treating you in a way that you think UNM students should not be treated, I want to know about it. And I'm sure the commanding officers do too.
Definitely. Again, Dean Weiss, thank you very much for being on the podcast. But
it's a great being here.
yeah, we'll
Thanks,
call
John.
it at that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.